Your ability to perceive visual and auditory stimuli has massive effects on your ability to accurately orient and ground yourself in your thoughts and your physical body. But least recognized and most importantly, the interdependence between your thoughts and your physical body as they create your emotion. Understanding perception in a basic and fundamental way can provide a foundation for the understanding of even more basic and fundamental ideas. Ideas such as time and ultimately perception of self, self-awareness. Perception can seem like a very complex idea, but it doesn't have to be. First, we can break down perception into two categories, visual and auditory. Auditory is simply what you hear, and visual, simply what you see. And from each category of visual or auditory, there is also visually pure perception, visually contextual perception, and likewise auditorily contextual perception and auditorily pure perception. Visual contextual perception requires light as reflected or reflections of color, while pure visual perception is only light as all visible wavelengths reflected instantaneously and without color differentiation. The same applies to auditory perception. Auditory contextual perception is the reverberation of sound as distinct and unique vibrations that have meaning, as with the words I am speaking. This is just as visual contextual perception as the perception of distinct and unique colors and color combinations. Just the same with pure auditory perception and pure visual perception. Only sound without meaning, only light without color. Individual light waves as reflections of distinct and individual color is visual contextual perception, which is perceptually differentiable by as many distinct colors and color combinations that are possible. This is patently and characteristically differentiated and therefore not undifferentiated or timeless. All light waves reflected creates the perception of white. No light waves reflected gives the perception of black, the absence of light. Pure visual perception is thereby differentiated by two or by the duality of light and dark, or black and white. Individual sound waves, as reverberations of distinct and individual meaning, are words. The words I am speaking, the words you are hearing. This is auditory contextual perception, and perceptually differentiable by as many distinct word sounds and combinations possible, and is characteristically differentiated, and therefore also is not undifferentiated or instantaneous. Meaning takes time. It takes time to interpret. It is not instantaneous. This is to say that you cannot find the undifferentiated, the instantaneous, the infinite or timeless in meaning or auditory contextual perception. If you are looking for timelessness or the undifferentiated in words, in meaning, while utilizing the perception of contextualized sound, then you are attempting the impossible and are only setting up an infinite behavior cycle that can never come to completion or gain the object or objective sought after, the undifferentiated, or timelessness, or the moment of perception. This same impossibility applies to visual contextual perception. The massive amounts of stimuli that visual contextual perception produces, with all of the impossibly complex variations of color, is pure differentiation. Be it the sun or the moon, there are so many perceivable elements and angles that it becomes impossible to differentiate all of them, except for in the moment of perception. Pure visual perception.
Visual perception.
The movement of light waves provide visual perception.
Auditory perception. Auditory perception.
The movement of sound waves provides for auditory perception.
Auditory perception. Auditory perception. Auditory perception.
Light waves and sound waves are movement. Light waves have been measured to move more quickly than sound waves. But at the moment of perception, is speed measurable or even relevant?
Perception.
Movement.
Perception.
Movement.
Perception.
Movement.
Perception. Perception.
Movement.
Perception.
Movement.
Perception.
Movement.
Perception.
Movement. Perception of movement. Perception is movement.
Perception. 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 Perception.
No light. No movement.
Perception. Perception.
Without light or sound, there is no auditory or visual perception. What about time and the perception of self if there is no movement?
Perception.
Movement. 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 Movement.
Perception.
There is no way not to perceive because you are perception. You are
Visual perception.
You are
Auditory perception.
You are
Perception.
You are
Visual perception.
You are
Auditory perception. Perception.
You are
Perception. Visual perception.
You are
Visual perception.
You are
Perception. Auditory perception.
You
Perception.
are
Auditory perception.
You
Visual perception.
are
Auditory
You
perception.
are
Auditory
You
visual
are
perception.
You
Visual
are
perception. Auditory
You
perception.
are
Visual perception. Auditory.
You are You are You are
Perception. Instantaneous.
We can hear the clock ticking. We can see the clock moving. We can hear the clock moving. We can see the clock moving. However, the perception of time is instantaneous. The moment of perception is instantaneous. The unit of measure for time, seconds, minutes, hours, days, years, millennia, frames the perception of time, thereby creating the illusion that time is not instantaneous, that perception takes time. Time is instantaneous. Time is instantaneous. And perception, as its own category unto itself, without visual or auditory contextualization or quote-unquote purity, which still requires some form of movement, as in light or sound waves, perception itself, and unto itself, at its most fundamental level, which also coincides with the most basic fundamental level of self-perception, because it is unmediated, undifferentiated, and it is instantaneous, formless. It is forever, timeless.
Auditory perception. 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 Auditory. 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 Auditory perception. Auditory perception. Auditory perception.
Without light or sound, there is no perception.